start the course off, we're going to cover CSV. CSV stands for comma-separated values. It is a file type that holds data. It is used throughout many different businesses around the world, so perhaps this might be useful in your everyday work. We're going to load some gems to achieve our exercise. We're going to load mini-test along with a utils gem and pry by bug to debug our tests in case we need them. These two gems are not part of the standard library, so you'll need to install the two gems separately. To do that, you go to the terminal and type in gem install and then the name of the gems. One of them is pry by bug and the other one is minitest-utils. Also install pry now that you're at it to install the dependency from this one. Most likely it will miss, so just make sure you type that in and install the three gems. Now that you're done, we'll be able to run the exercise with these utilitary gems. We're also going to require the most important part of the exercise, the CSV library. This library is included in the Ruby standard library, so there's no additional gem to enable this functionality. We're going to have a product class and a product repository. This class right here will hold all of the logic to communicate with this data format. Let's focus on the product repository test. I've created this test case in order to demonstrate how we can use CSV in this matter. So we're going to start off by removing a CSV file indicated in the file constant. We'll take a look at that later. Next, we're going to create a new product by typing in product.new with a name, a price, and a category. We'll resort to the create method in the product repository. This is our story. We want to create this method that will handle the responsibility of storing a new product record in the product CSV file. So the first test that I want to focus on is the middle one. It creates a record based off a product. So we want to create a product, and then we want to assert that there is at least one product in the repository. So only one record in the file. For that purpose, I'm going to skip the remaining tests, like so, and now we can focus our attention on this very file. The way I'm going to run the tests is by actually calling the Ruby command with this specific file. I'll type in Ruby and then csv.rb. The file will be available in the repository on GitHub. Check the link that I've provided in the introduction lesson. So, running Ruby CSV, you will see two skip tests and another one which has an error. There's an undefined method length for nil. Okay, let's go back to the editor and see what we should do. So in the all method, we are being retrieved a nil. That's the section of our code that we'll need to focus on. But first, we need to make sure that the create method is doing its job correctly. So let's jump into the create method. The create method takes a product, which we'll shove in to the file. So how do we solve this challenge? How do we use the CSV library in order to insert that record? We do that with this block. We will open a file using csv.open with the file location. The file location will be the result of the constant. So basically, we're going to create a new file under a temporary folder. And here we're going to make sure that we use this a+ flag, which means that we want to insert new records at the end of the CSV file, but also being able to read from that file. So we use the plus flag as well. The separator is going to be the vertical pipe instead of a comma. The default one is like so, but we want to use a pipe instead. Let's assume that in any instance, we want to insert commas in the text. By establishing the vertical pipe as a separator, it reduces the margins for error. So in this block, we'll take the CSV object. We want to establish an ID for the product first, to which we'll resort to the CSV count, and this will basically retrieve the number of records in the file. So in this first scenario, the count is going to be 0 because the file is empty. Remember, in line 45, we're doing exactly so. We're removing the entire file and creating one again in line 34. So the ID is established, and at the end, we'll resort to this instruction that will shovel this product into the CSV file. This operator essentially inserts a new record into the CSV file. But notice how we're using the toA method in the product. After all, a CSV file with this operator takes an array and not an object. So we'll need to figure out a way in the product class that implements this toA method and retrieves an array. As you can see in line 16, we already have that implementation. We are going to resort to add ID, name, price, and category into an array. So we're going to save this file and check whether the test is green or not. So we'll run this file again, and you can see that we have 3 errors now. That means that something is affecting the entire set of tests. Let's see. We don't have this ID equal method for the product class. Oh, that's very easy to fix. All we need to do is type in add a writer and then ID, which will basically create that ID equals method. With this, we're going to be able to write the ID property, and then when running the tests, you will see that we now have a different error. I mean, this was the previous one as well. The length variable here is still not defined, but this only regards the final test. This one right here. Product.repository.all should be an array of products, but we still don't have anything in terms of the all method. There's nothing here. So let's take care of that right away. The way we do it is by reading the file into a CSV variable. Well, you can name it whatever you want. What's important though is that you use the CSV module and then reach out to the read method. You want to pass in a file location the same way we did when creating the product, and also providing the column separator. The next thing you need to do is to use the toA method, which will basically convert every piece of data into an array with different items. And then in this particular case, we want to use the map function, which will transform that array into a new representation. For each different row, we'll create a new product with the data that's passed on the ID. You might be wondering what this is, this star row variable. Well, it is the very same thing as typing product.new and then shoving in an array of data. So when you use star with an array right next to it, which is what the row is, it's an array, you are going to basically send those items as arguments to the constructor. Because we know that this row will only have 4 items, namely the ID, name, price, and category, like this. This is the usual representation. Because we are using a star, this will be in effect. It's going to do the very same thing, but because we have an array of items, we can do it. So in here, we could type in something like, let's see, row 0, and then row 1, and then row 2 and row 3. This will do the very same thing. But because this is quite not readable, or not as readable as what we had before, this will do just fine. So as a result, we can just run the tests, and it will stay green now. So we just wanted to make sure that we had one record there. Assert equal 1 and compare it to the length of the entire list of products. This means that the file was successfully populated. In fact, if I show you the contents of those products, there you go, just open the CSV file by typing in cat and the location of the file. There you go. 0, microphone, 200, and audio. Well, curiously enough, you should have an ID that's greater than 0, so if you add in count plus 1, this should do the trick as well. There you go. And now checking the contents of that file, the ID will be 1. The name, price, and category are there. So that handles the first test. What about the remaining two? Let's make sure that it retrieves a list of products, and basically we want to make sure that the first item is a product. So let's just run that test, and you will see that it is green. We want to make sure that it was a product, because if, for example, we didn't have this new product and just typed in, for example, 1, this will make the first test pass, but the second one wouldn't be a valid test. You can see that we expected a product but got a fixed num. So reverting this change, so making sure that we have a product instead of something else, we retain the behavior that was there, which validates the test we had. There you go. The same thing goes with the final test that finds a record by the key. So in this particular case, we want to find it with the ID of 1. Remember, if I passed in 0 like this, it would return something different. As you can see, we expected nil to be a product. Basically, we still need to implement the find method. I'm going to leave the 0 parameter in line 61 because you will most likely realize that the ID is incorrect. In this implementation for find, we're going to use the very same read method, and we'll basically try and find this record based off the list of products. Basically, what we want to do is look up each different row and check whether the number that's being passed to us matches the ID right here, the one that's passed in as a parameter. We'll retrieve the first field in that row which matches the ID, try to convert it to a number, and if it exists, which means that if the record is not nil, in line 36 we'll create a new product, or we'll just return nil. So when trying to run the test, you will see that we still get that nil. That's because we want to make sure that this is 1 and not 0. We've checked before in the CSV file content, so when running the test, you will see that the test is now green. So to sum it up, let's go to the product repository class right here and observe this new way of working with CSV. So we want to require CSV. This is the main part. Without it, we won't be able to manipulate CSV files. Back to the product repository class, we want to ensure that we use the csv.read method in order to retrieve a CSV kind of object. In order to get the contents in an array fashion, you use toA. We have used it in order to run through all of the records and retrieve new products. In the find method, we will use the toA method again, but to find a specific record. In the create method, it was a little different. We had to open the CSV file with a proper operation flag, which I'm going to give a link about it in the description. The separator is also very important. And then we want to manipulate the product in order to have the ID, after which we can shove the product into the CSV file, or rather the array that maps that product. This instruction will basically transform or manipulate the file in order to have new data. If you want to know more information about the CSV tool, you can read through the documentation, the official one, from rubydoc.org. The link is in the description below, and it will give you access to this very page. You have examples on how to quickly search for some content in a file, parse data from there, and also writing to that file. The list of methods is right on the left side, and also some classes that maybe you want to take a look at. After all, the CSV table, for example, is the class that gets returned from the read method. So be sure to take a look at this as well.